Today's topic is how to build a successful social media campaign. And with me today, I have got my colleagues Freya and Phoebe. They are experts in their field. They've been serving our clients particularly over the last year during lockdown and sort of learning how all of this has been changing. So they've got lots of tips to share with you today on how we do things at HdK, which I hope you will find useful and you may be able to adopt for your own strategies. So we're going to cover three main areas. The first one is all around goal setting. You can't have a good campaign without being really clear and really clear about what you're trying to achieve. And particularly because we work mainly with arts organisations, we are focusing on audiences. Now, we do have clients who are outside of the arts and entertainment sector, and you're very welcome here today. And all I would do is just translate some of those words where we say audiences, we mean clients and customers just as much. And all of this is transferable. So although a lot of our examples are based on the arts, it really does work across the field. The next point that we're going to cover is choosing and planning your content. And Freya is going to take this up, and she is going to talk about some of the ways that we have been helping our clients over the last year. And then finally, no campaign is, you're never really going to learn and improve if you don't study your results and try and see if there are better ways to do things in the future. And both Freya and Phoebe are going to talk about optimizing those results and always improving. So because I want to leave, because there's a lot of you here, there's already 70 of you in the room, I want to leave as much time for questions later on. So I'm going to crack on and hand over to Phoebe, who is going to talk about setting goals.
Thank you. Hello everyone, it's exciting to see you all this morning. There's some names that I recognise, so I'm excited to speak to you later. So first we're going to start with looking at setting goals and leading with audiences. So the best social media campaigns are always led by rigorous strategy work. Your strategy should outline what your goals are with the campaigns and the targets that you're going to use to achieve them. You can then break down how you're going to achieve these targets based on research, analytics, and experience. At the end of your campaign, you can then say with confidence how you achieved your bigger picture goals and what you can learn from this campaign for the future. So first, we're going to look at how to set goals and measure them with targets. So on screen, we've provided 4 examples of bigger picture goals, and then we'll talk through how we might measure our success for each of them. So bigger picture goals. Number 1, we want to raise awareness for the organisation or campaign. So the targets that we might set to measure that specifically would be, we might want to measure the total impressions of that campaign. We might want to increase our followers by a certain number across all of the platforms. And we might want to generate a certain number of video views on Facebook. All of these targets are measurable ways that we can say that we've raised awareness for the organisation or campaign. Number 2, we want to use the website as a central campaign hub. So how can we measure that we're doing that? So for the targets for that, we've got, perhaps we could reach a monthly average of a certain number of web visits or generate a certain number of web clicks through advertising. We might want to measure how long people are spending on the website and set a target session duration for the campaign. These all show us that we are using the website as a central campaign hub. The third goal that we have is increasing engagement with young audiences. So how might we measure that? So the targets that we might set for that are, can we contact 50 youth organisations regarding the campaign? Can we generate 50% of all of our ad results from young target audiences? And can we aim to share 10 total posts on TikTok where we know young audiences are the majority share? Finally, oh, I think we've got a bit of feedback actually. Who's that? Could we? Oh, fab. Would you mind muting yourself, please? That'd be really helpful. Thank you so much. The fourth example goal that we have is we want to improve our online accessibility. So how can we measure that we're actually doing that? We could ensure that we're adding captions and sign language to 100% of the video posts that we share. We can make sure that in every image post, we share alt text and or descriptions. And we can say that by the end of the campaign, we're going to have made 5 changes to the website to improve accessibility. And that way we can say, with this campaign, we worked to improve online accessibility. So once you've set these goals and targets, you can then put them into a spreadsheet and check in with them, whether it's weekly or monthly, and we'll talk about how to do that later on. When you're going along in the campaign, you can then see, okay, we're not getting, for instance, the impressions that we set out to. What can we do to change that? How can we adjust our approach to make sure we're hitting all of our targets? Working in this way with goals and targets to measure them allows you to approach your social media campaign with focus from the very beginning. Okay, so next we're going to look at the importance of identifying your audiences. And at the very beginning of your campaign, it's important to establish who your audiences are and how to engage with them online. This will then guide the activity that you include in your social media campaign and again help you remain focused on your goals from the beginning to the end. So how to identify your audiences. For this part of the process, we recommend that you seek answers to a number of questions and collate your findings. And we've listed these questions on the screen and we'll just talk through them now. So first, ask yourself, what is it that I'm promoting? Is it a performance, an exhibition, or a live stream? What are the themes of this performance that we can pull out and who might they connect with? What cultures or experiences are represented in this art piece? Does it contain music, dance, art, acting, or other skills? What do we know about the people who've attended these kind of performances with us in the past? Are there any industry surveys available on audience demographics or behaviour in my industry? Or are there any other resources that I can call on? So by asking yourself these questions as you create your social media strategy, you can use all of the resources that you have to create a picture of the different kinds of people that your performance, exhibition, or other experience might resonate with. At this point, you might even want to break it down into 2 to 4 audiences. And from there, you can look at how to engage with them online and make sure that your campaign is serving the purpose that it's supposed to. So we're going to go through an example of how to do this. So let's say you're promoting a contemporary dance tour that has break dance elements mixed with jazz. So on the basis of the performance's themes, you could identify your audiences as contemporary dance fans, breakdance enthusiasts, jazz lovers, and just general arty types. From there, you can then begin to look at how to engage with these groups through your campaign. And one of the tools that we find most useful for doing this is the audience agency's 10 audience spectrum profiles. So these profiles break the UK population into different groups based on their attitudes towards culture, what they like to see, what they do. And using these, you can take your target audiences, so contemporary dance fans or breakdance enthusiasts, and look at which of the spectrum profiles would apply to each. We're going to go into these in a bit more detail, so bear with me on this. Once you've identified your audience spectrum profiles, you can then break down how to engage with them. We are going to share a link, just so you know what we're talking about as we talk about it, to the audience agency's spectrum profiles, just so that you can have a quick look later. So let's take breakdance enthusiasts, for example, and look at the audience spectrum profiles to identify the best fit. So there are 10 profiles, but I've included 2 examples here just for quickness. So we have got here experienced seekers and dormitory dependables. So first, let's have a look at experienced seekers. The audience agency describes these people, this group of people as highly active, diverse, social and ambitious, engaging with arts on a regular basis. They make up a significant part of urban arts audiences, and they are younger people engaging with the arts on a regular basis. So that's experience seekers. Next, we have dormitory dependables. Most of this group live in suburban or small towns and show a preference for heritage activities alongside popular and more traditional mainstream arts. Many are thriving, well-off mature couples or busy older families. So out of these two, I feel like it's quite obvious as to which would fit our breakdance enthusiast audience, and that would be experience seekers. So for some of your target audiences, it might be that 1, 2, or even 3 of the spectrum profiles fit within your audience. So it's worth having a thorough read through each of them so that you have a better understanding. What's then really helpful about the spectrums is that they provide loads of demographic information, such as their cultural preferences, the media that they like to read, their online habits, where they live, what their interests are, and most helpfully for us, how to engage with them online. So looking at the experience seekers profile, for example, we can take key characteristics from them and identify how we would use that information to engage with them through our social media campaign. So on screen now, we've listed on the left the experience seekers characteristics, and then on the right, how we would use that information to inform decisions about our social media campaign. So we know that experience seekers are social media savvy. So to engage with them, we want to make sure that we're using up and coming social media platforms. We know that they like to see plays, go to galleries and see public art. They live close to city centres. They use streaming apps such as Spotify and read The Guardian and the Metro. So when we're advertising, we can target them based on all of those things. So where is their location? What are they interested in? What media do they read? We also know that they like to seek out new experiences and can be quite spontaneous in their choices. So is it then possible for you to seed your campaign out to different social media outlets that share information about new experiences that people can go along to? Finally, we know that social opportunities are their driving force. So when we're delivering our campaign, we want to ensure that social media creates a sense of atmosphere or the fun kind of vibe of your event. So of course, these are just a few examples. There's loads of more information on each of the profiles that you can get online. But it's just a kind of quick top line look at how these audience spectrum profiles can help you ensure that your campaigns are engaging with your audiences. So we recommend taking a deep dive when you're creating your strategy to help you decide what activity to include. In the lead up to this webinar, we asked people for questions. So thank you to those of you who sent them in. One of the questions that we were asked is, I organise events for young people. So I'd be particularly interested to learn about the platforms they can be found on and any strategies for engaging them. So obviously so far we've looked at the audience spectrum, which between the 10 profiles provide a number of ideas in terms of how to engage with audience members from a variety of ages, with people like the experience seekers, including young people. So we'd encourage you to take a look at these, as there's a huge amount of learning you can do. We're also going to look next at how to choose which platforms you're going to work on, which will hopefully also help to answer this question. So there are a number of different factors to consider when choosing your platforms, and we have listed them on screen just to give you a better idea. Firstly, you should start by having a detailed understanding of who your current audiences are on each platform. For instance, what's the most common age range and location, and any other important demographic information that you can gauge. Next, what are the majority demographics of each platform in general? So for instance, if you're looking to engage with young people, you will want to search for the platforms with the highest majority of younger age ranges. Thirdly, have a look at what others are doing on these platforms to engage with these groups. What's working for them that could be worth trying with your campaign? Finally, what am I actually able to do with the resources that I have available? Obviously, there'll be so many ideas that you come across during this process, and it's a case of narrowing down the best ones for your campaign. So as you explore these questions, input your findings into your social media strategy and use these to make clear decisions as to what platforms you're going to focus on. So another question that we had in the lead up to today's session was about Facebook. And is Facebook worth engaging with at this point, or am I better with Instagram? I run an arts and heritage business working with museums, galleries, and other attractions, schools, old people's homes, etc. So thank you for sending that in, Karen. So this is an interesting question, and we do get asked this quite a lot, actually. So it's obviously a bit of a perception thing with Facebook. So for some of our clients, who most of them work in the arts, as Hans said earlier, Facebook has completely remained worthwhile. For instance, for a campaign we delivered earlier this year, Facebook, out of all of their platforms, was the most engaged. So we would absolutely recommend them continuing to prioritize that platform. But for others, we would advise against it because it just doesn't work for what they do and who their audience is. This is because, as we know, different platforms work for different organizations because you all have different offerings and you all have different audiences. What we would recommend in response to this question then, oh yeah, sorry, I just lost where I was. What we would recommend in response to this question is looking at your engagement on each of the platforms that you're posting on. So if Facebook is getting the lowest engagement, are there more things that you can do on Facebook to improve your engagement? Carry out an audit and look at the content that you're posting, what's doing well, what's not doing well. Can I post more of the things that are doing well, and can I get rid of the things that aren't performing? And if you then feel that you've done everything you can on that platform and you're still not getting engagement, then perhaps it's time to prioritize other platforms like Instagram. It can also help to have a look at what your peers are doing on the platform to get some ideas. And also, if you find that most of your peers aren't on a particular platform, then it might be either that it's not worthwhile, or it could be that it's an opportunity for you to lead on that platform. So now we've experienced the building blocks for your social media strategy, we are going to look at the kinds of content that you can engage your audiences with. But I can see that we've had a few comments so far, so we just want to have a little pause and provide everybody with an opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you, Phoebe. And Emma, who submitted a question in advance, at the same time as you were answering her question, she had another question about audience spectrum. So thank you, Emma. And she asks, do young people aged 12 to 19 feature in the audience agencies spectrum?
Yes, yeah. So I think the purpose of the audience agency spectrums is that it basically groups the entire UK population into 10 spectrum profiles. And then it essentially makes it much easier for you to segment them and to figure out who you're talking to, how you want to market to them. So yeah, I think all age groups are covered.
And Mark asks, is it possible to share a sample engagement plan? Now, I know we're talking about engagement in a future webinar. And I know we've got, no, we haven't got an engagement plan coming up in this webinar though, have we?
No, so we've got I think it's our June webinar is about how to improve engagement on social media. So I think with that, obviously this is all about engagement in general, but yeah, we can absolutely share. There's resources that we have like calendars, and we'll go into that a bit later on, and hopefully they'll be helpful.
Yeah. And Lucy, just to answer your question, will these slides be available? Yeah, we'll put them up on our website from tomorrow. So we'll put up all the slides plus any questions we don't get a chance to answer in this session. We'll answer those and put those up, and we'll send you an email just to let you know when it's up on the site. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Phoebe. So now that we've established how it's really essential to narrow your focus by setting clear targets and establishing a clear audience, I'm now going to look at how you can build out your content ideas and plan your posts. So when it comes to developing content, the first step is always research and analysis. So firstly, by looking at your own social media accounts. So to understand what is working and what content is having a desired effect and which content isn't, we would recommend setting up a SWOT analysis. So looking at your social media accounts and establishing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what content is working well? What content is getting the most engagement? What content is getting the least engagement? And what opportunities could you take up? So are there any trends that you could look at using in your next social media campaign? And then also establishing what threats, so what might harm the success of your next social media campaign. Now, once you've analysed your own brand accounts, it's worth outlining 2 or 3 industry leaders or peers at your level in the industry and completing a SWOT analysis on their social media accounts too, to understand what content is working for them and what you might be able to take from their content ideas and apply to your own plan. Now, I did a quick example for this. So say if you were looking to run a social media campaign to promote a new arts gallery, then it would be worth looking at leading accounts like the Tate Modern or Saatchi Gallery. So from just looking across their accounts, I could pick up on a few key things about their content that was really prevalent across both of their social media platforms. So the first was there was a clear emphasis on key dates and finding art content that matched trending topics like Easter or Earth Day. I also found that they both tended to use image content rather than video content, and both applied a fun and witty tone in their captions. They both also had their own content strands like work of the week or work of the month. So from this, if I was opening my own art gallery, I might look at what I might want to include that's similar to theirs or that's gaining a lot of engagement for them, and then think about how I can apply that to my own content plan for my social media campaign. When you are in this kind of like analytic phase and you are looking through your own social media accounts and looking at others, there are a few key questions that you should think about and just keep in mind when you're going through those platforms. So the first is, how many followers do they have? So which accounts do they have the most followers on? And do they have a similar amount of followers to yourself? Are they using the same content across platforms? Which platforms are they using? So are they using new platforms like TikTok? How often are they posting? And are they posting the same amount across each platform? Or do they post maybe, more regularly on Twitter and then a couple of times on Facebook a week? Do they use any particular hashtags? What type of content gains the most engagement? And what type of content is gaining the least engagement? So from your analysis, you can start to look at how you can develop your own content strands and assets that could be used in your next social media campaign. Develop an idea of what assets would look like, what platforms they would work on, and what audiences they would resonate with. Now that you've got a clear idea about your content that you want to produce, you can start to build out your strategy and campaign. Now, the first step for this is building out a social media calendar or a social media plan. And this should include your calendar, hashtags, and a seeding list. So the calendar should map out each of the month's social media posts, outlining the purpose, the content, messaging, and the platforms that they'll be going on. We like to use Google Sheets just because it's a kind of easy platform to use and you can work on it collaboratively and share it. You should also include any details of hashtags or any account tags for each of your target audiences. That way, when you go to schedule posts, you've got a bank of thoughtful and relevant hashtags to choose from. Other information you can include is personalized hashtags for a campaign or even irrelevant emojis that you might want to use in your social media posts. Finally, you should build out a seeding list section, which outlines any key accounts that you should tag in relevant posts. For instance, you might want to tag venues, theatres, or even relevant media accounts to help encourage them to engage and share with your content. You can also build out an outreach campaign focused on contacting certain industry members to encourage them to share and interact with your content. And we'll be looking at this in a little bit more detail shortly. The final step of planning is scheduling, and we would recommend scheduling a month ahead and diarising time each week to check what's topical and whether you should be posting about it. This allows room for flexibility and also allows you time to be reactive. And I think that's been really useful for us during this time, as you know, things often change. We're living in times where we can't plan too far in advance because we don't know what things might be like at that point in time. So having it that month in ahead gives you time to kind of respond to those changes and not feel overwhelmed. So before we move on to the next section, which is going to look at optimizing results, I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions about any of the kind of social media plan or how to kind of go through analysing content.
Doesn't look like there's any questions. Best practice with hashtags. Oh, here we go. They're just starting to come in. Sorry, I didn't give you long enough. Jill is skeptical. She's asking, do you actually post a month ahead?
Yeah, so we basically will use a platform like Hootsuite, or we'll use a platform like Sprout Social, so where we can schedule a month in advance for posts. So obviously, you know, things may change and some clients work on a kind of, it's a more tight turnaround with posts if they haven't got the content till a week before or things like that. But where we can and we can look ahead to the future, we'll make sure that we've kind of scheduled posts in advance, just so that we can know that we've definitely got content going out. And I think using platforms like Sprout Social or Hootsuite make that really, really easy to do, and kind of take a bit of that pressure off of having to post on a weekly basis. So if we can, it's possible.
Thank you, Fran. I think you've touched on Guldeep's question about what best social media schedule would you recommend. And there's a couple of other questions. Actually, there's a few questions. I don't think we'll have time to answer all of them just now. How often should you be posting on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram?
So I think it can really depend, and obviously we do recommend, you know, you post regularly, but also we recommend that it's quality over quantity. So making sure that you've got real quality content that's worth posting about is going to mean that you get the most engagement. You know, posting for the sake of posting isn't necessarily going to have the desired effect in making you have engagement, but we do kind of suggest that you do keep like a presence on those platforms, so not having long periods of no posting. But yeah, it's definitely should be guided by the quality of your content and having things that are, you know, worth posting about and kind of making noise about on social media.
And I think as well, it's also about like consistency. So if, for instance, you start posting every day on one of your platforms, and then for some reason you run out of content and therefore you're not posting as much for the rest of the month, then that will damage your engagement, because I think you need to set a precedent for what your audiences can expect from you and then follow that. So whether that's like on Instagram, whether you're posting once a week or once a day, I think it's just sticking to that, provided you have the quality content available.
Thank you. There's lots of other great questions, and we want to answer them for you. We'll either come back to them at the end in the question session at the end, or we'll definitely answer them online. So thank you, and keep your questions coming.
Great. So the final section of the webinar is going to look at optimizing results. And it's really important to note that once you've kind of scheduled your posts, that's not where your social media campaign ends. And social media is a two-way street, and so you need to be ready to be reactive and to respond to followers. And in order to do this, we recommend building out time in your weekly schedule to dedicate to checking your social media accounts and responding to comments or messages. To support your campaign further, you can also build out an outreach plan. And outreach includes interacting with relevant accounts or even emailing network contacts to let them know about your campaign and to ask for their support. For instance, if you're promoting an event that's based in Coventry and showcases artwork created by young artists from Black backgrounds, you might want to include marketing professionals from the below types of organisations in your outreach. So social media accounts posting about arts activity in Coventry, what's on in Coventry accounts, groups that support young artists, youth groups in general, groups that support people from Black backgrounds, local and national arts organisations, and any strategic partners of yours with long-standing relationships. Once you've identified these in your seeding list for your campaign, you can tag their social media accounts in your posts and email venues or contacts to let them know about your campaign and ask them to share it on their platforms. When conducting outreach via email, here are some things that we would recommend including in your emails to encourage recipients to share. So first of all, including any assets or content, so an image or a video that's optimized for social media platforms, including any relevant links. So any links to your website where they can find out more information. Handles, so your relevant social media handles, so that way you'll be notified when they share your content. Hashtags, so any relevant hashtags or personalized hashtags for your campaign. And social media copy, so provide social media copy for all platforms so that people can just copy and paste and share about your event. By providing all of these details, it can really help encourage people who potentially don't have a lot of time to share your content quickly and efficiently. So it just, they kind of have all of the means to do it, and they can do it really quickly for you. So now that we've looked at how you can ensure that you've got your content being shared by other platforms and you're responding to your comments and your followers, Phoebe's going to have a quick look at now how you can track your targets and why it's important to track your targets as the campaign develops.
Thank you. So so at the very beginning, we laid out why it's important to set goals and measure them with targets. And hopefully this will kind of really demonstrate why it's important and how it can be helpful. So what it basically allows you to do is make sure that you are hitting your targets throughout the campaign, whether it's a month in, 3 months in, or however long your campaign is. So to do so, we recommend creating a way that you can track your targets on a weekly, fortnightly or monthly basis, depending on how long your social media campaign is. So if your campaign in total is a month, you might want to track your targets weekly, or if it's 3 months, you might want to do it monthly. It's entirely up to you. We do this by using a target tracking spreadsheet. And on this, you can break down each of your aims and the targets for each, updating them as the campaign progresses. So for instance, let's say that one of your targets is to achieve 100,000 web visits across a 3-month campaign period. After 1 month, you update your tracking sheet and you find that you've only had visits when you're aiming for 100,000. Another of your targets is to achieve 50,000 video views. 1 month in, you've hit 35,000. What you can then do is look at what you have planned moving forwards and prioritize activity that will help you reach your web visits target. So for instance, what are your posts for the next month trying to get your followers to do? If it's to watch your video content, you can now switch that to focus on driving traffic to your website. So tracking your targets in this way allows you to create a system to flag any potential issues with your campaign and address them in real time before it becomes a real issue. It can also help you identify what's working well and figure out how you can do more of this, or even apply that success to other targets. And in this slide, we've included 2 tracking sheet examples. The one on the right is more of an overall target tracker. We use both. And the one on the left, we found helps us understand the full extent of our video views. So for instance, we can track the different videos and how many views we've got on each of our platforms. But if we've also shared that video with lots of different organizations and asked them to share it, we can also have a look at their social media platforms and monitor how many views it's getting on there. And that way we can really capture the full extent of the views that it's achieving. And tracking all of this in detail is super important to the success of your campaigns. It can feel a little bit time consuming and at times boring, but it helps you optimize your current campaign and gives you loads of information to inform future campaigns. And Freya has very helpfully put together a Google Sheet, which I think Hans is going to share in the chat now. And it's got some of our templates for the suggestions that we've made today. So things like the calendar, and the hashtags, the seeding list, the target tracking sheets, and all of that stuff. So we really hope that that will be helpful to you. And yeah, that's our talking session of the webinar finished.
Okay, thank you. Apparently that needs an access code, so we will try and work that out probably afterwards, and we'll definitely make it accessible on the website for you to download from tomorrow as well. So we have come to the questions section, and I sense that there's going to be quite a few questions that we can pick up on. So let's take 5 to 10 minutes on those. Before we've got another pre-submitted question. So we'll start off with that one, and then we'll pick out some questions from the ones that you're putting into the chat box now. In the next, I think with the next slide has the next question, Freya. Yeah. So when and how can I use Instagram stories? How can I engage older age groups on social media? And that's from Julia Stevens.
So in terms of using Instagram stories, these are a really good way to kind of experiment with different content types and generate further engagement. They're much more engaging than actual posts because Instagram has created lots of fun tools like polls and questions and slider votes and that kind of thing that you can use to interact with your followers. So I think it's with Instagram stories, because they're impermanent, they're very kind of, you know, they expire after 24 hours. I think just experiment and see what content your users engage with. Maybe you can try setting up like a series that you do once a week that people can interact with and see if that picks up. And if it doesn't, then try something else. It's just a kind of fun way to experiment.
Thank you, Phoebe.
And then,
sorry.
In terms of the second part, so how to engage with older groups, for this, we would recommend looking at your age demographics across all of the different platforms and identify which has the highest majority of older users. If none of them have that many, then just have a look at each of the platforms, their kind of overall age demographics, and think about how you can be using them.
Great, thank you. So we've had a question in the chat box. Sorry if I've pronounced your name wrong, Sania. And you ask, by posting on all the social media platforms at once, does it help the engagement?
No, in short. So each platform will have different optimal times to post on. So on a very basic level, you should be posting at those times. Also, each of the platforms are super different in terms of how people use them, the content types that people share. So as much as is possible with the budget that you have available, it's good to vary that as much as you can and really tailor your content to each of the platforms you're on.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question from Sania. Does a photo gain more engagement or a video? Does it need to be balanced?
I think that video content, there's a lot of research that suggests that video content can be the most engaging content, particularly on platforms like Facebook and on Instagram, but it is definitely worth varying the content that you use. So including video content, including image content, and kind of mixing it up. And then also seeing if those kind of research, if it applies to your audiences, because it will also depend on your audiences too. And that's why it's really, really important to do that kind of SWOT analysis on your own social media account first, because that will really let you know what content works for your audiences and where you're gaining the most engagement, as that will vary for different people and different audiences.
And Alex asks, how often should you be posting on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram? Someone's not on mute.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, I see you. No fighting.
Right, I think it's Susan. I'm just going to put you on mute, Susan. Sorry, carry on.
So I think we touched on this in the webinar, actually. Which one? So how often to post? Yeah, so it's just about quality and consistency.
Yeah, and then Teresa asks, hello Teresa, I hope you're well. What are the optimal times to post for each platform?
So the optimal times for each platform, they change regularly. So we kind of just, if you give them a Google, they're very easily available. At the same time, those are just generic times. They're not specific to your audience. So on platforms like Instagram, for instance, you can look at the insights and they'll provide which days are most active for your users and which times. So when you find that, you can then make sure you're posting at that time, and then that would be the optimal time for engagement. So, and then I think on platforms like Facebook and Twitter, they don't tell you exactly. Actually, no, Facebook does, Twitter doesn't. So it's a case of looking at your best performing posts, what time they went out, and identifying a pattern.
Brilliant, thank you. Hello, Vivian. Do you think it's worth using the paid Instagram promotions? Is there an effective way of using these promotions? Do you think it's worth using the paid Instagram promotions?
Yeah, we definitely find that when we obviously have advertising budget for campaigns, that can really help achieving some of your targets and also reaching your target audiences. There are different options. Obviously, with Facebook Ads Manager, you can run Instagram campaigns through that, and then you can also just boost posts on Instagram too. We usually would recommend using Ads Manager, which can feel a bit more tricky at the beginning, but just kind of persevering with it and trying to become more comfortable with using that, as you can be really targeted then with the audiences that you want your ad to go to, and also with what you want to get from that advert, whether it be video views or link clicks or engagement or any of those sorts of things. So you can be really specific about how you want that ad spend to support your campaign, what targets you really want to hit. So yeah, we definitely recommend where you can to use advertising budget, and to just make sure that you're being really focused on the targets for the adverts and your target audiences in those adverts too.
Great, thank you, Lou. So Elfin asks, it would be lovely to hear something about hashtags. Are they important or not? I think you did ask a question earlier on about hashtags, and let me just check the wording for that.
I think it was about best practice with hashtags in general. So Freya's probably gonna be more expert on this, but I'll just say firstly that best practice, as with everything, differs across each platform, but it's also very tempting, I think, with hashtags to put, I think on Instagram there's like a maximum of 30 that you're allowed to use, and it can be very tempting to kind of want to use your maximum allowance. But when you think about it, if you're promoting, for instance, like a particular gallery exhibition, and the purpose of hashtags is for people relevant to your content to see your content and engage with it. If you're using loads of hashtags, you might then water down how relevant they are and how targeted those audiences are. So if you're just putting in like hashtag art, there's going to be people all over the world that are going to see that hashtag that it might not necessarily engage with. So I think I would say just err on the side of caution and probably don't use your maximum allowance, and just really think about whether the hashtags that you're using are going to connect you with the audiences that you're actually trying to engage with. I don't know if Freya has anything to add.
Yeah, I basically the same what you said there, and just that when you are kind of looking for hashtags, you can find how popular they are, and what we would usually recommend is using maybe some broader hashtags, but then also using some really specific hashtags that are really narrowed and focused on what your post is about or what your event or company is about. And the way you can do that is by even just on Instagram searching hashtags, and then you can see on there how many times they've been used. And obviously if they've been used millions of times, that's a really broad hashtag. So you might want to pick one that's similar but a bit further down the list, that's more narrow and more focused on what you're kind of promoting.
Right, thank you. And I'm going to one last question. Oh, I think one last question. Yeah. Oh, Susan asks, what is a realistic budget for marketing? Gosh, that's such a big question.
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it's difficult to say because because we work with, you know, budgets that are in the hundreds and budgets that are in the thousands, and I think it really depends on the scope of what you want to achieve. Yeah, I think that's a difficult one to answer.
I mean, I think the great thing about social advertising is that you can test out with small amounts of money. You can get a feel of what kind of results you might get, and then you can build your budget around that. So there's always a chance to experiment. Definitely the big commercial brands, they spend thousands of pounds on this, and a lot of our clients don't have those sorts of budgets. So it's about finding what's comfortable within your within your wider budget, and then the more you do of this, the more you learn what can be delivered for that budget. And then, you know, as you do different campaigns, you learn that the value of spending money on social.